Okay, so you know how we all kind of like to ponder the big questions, right? Like what really connects us to other people? What makes certain relationships so, well, so meaningful? Those connections we call friendships.
Exactly. I mean, we all have them. But what's the essence of it all?
Yeah, and today we're going to try to get to the bottom of that, like the philosophical heart of friendship itself.
Diving deep, huh? It sounds like a challenge.
Oh, it definitely is. But we're lucky to have this awesome resource to guide us, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Ah, yes. That's a pretty solid starting point. What are we looking at specifically?
Well, they have a whole entry on friendship,
Hmm.
really comprehensive stuff. How some of the most influential thinkers have approached this fundamental aspect of human life.
Right.
It's perfect for our, deep dive.
The deep dive into the deep dive. I like it.
Yeah.
So where do we even start with something as big as friendship?
Right. Well, the goal here isn't to find like simple, definitive answers. I mean, philosophy rarely works that way.
Totally. More about asking the right questions, right?
Exactly. We want to unpack the concepts, the core ideas, and the enduring puzzles that philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
And bring our listeners along for the ride.
Exactly. Together, we'll explore the many facets of friendship, its value, its justification, and how it fits into our understanding of morality.
Sounds like a plan. So step one, what is friendship, really?
Okay, yeah, let's start with the basics. What are those foundational elements that define friendship? What makes it, well, friendship?
At its core, friendship is a personal relationship. Not just any relationship, though. It's built on a mutual concern for the other person's well-being. But, and this is key, that concern is for their sake, not for any benefit you might get from it.
Oh, that's a good point. Like not just using someone for your own ends.
Exactly. And it also involves some level of intimacy, like a genuine closeness and connection.
Okay, that makes sense. Concern for the other's sake. That seems like a pretty crucial idea here. And the source points out that philosophers have thought a lot about different forms of love, trying to understand this better. There's agape, eros, and philia. Do those help us understand friendship better?
They definitely can. Each sheds light on different aspects of how we relate to others.
Okay, break it down for me.
Well, agape is often seen as this unconditional love. It's about creating value in the world. Eros, on the other hand, is more about passionate desire, often connected to the physical, like a longing for union.
Oh, I see, like the classic love
Yeah,
stories.
exactly. And then there's philia, which refers more to an affectionate regard, a sense of fellow feeling.
So more like the warm fuzzies.
In a way, yes, although it's deeper than that. And the source highlights philia as the most relevant to our modern idea of friendship.
Ah, so that's our starting point. Philia. But philosophers love making those fine distinctions, right? And I noticed the source emphasizes that friendship as a relationship is distinct from love considered as just an evaluative attitude. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Think of it this way. You can love someone, like admire their qualities or feel strongly about them, without actually having a relationship with them.
Oh, right, like a celebrity crush or something?
Yeah, good example. That kind of love doesn't need to be reciprocated. It can exist without a deep, established connection. But friendship, that requires reciprocation. It's built on that mutual concern we talked about.
Right, you can't really have a one-sided friendship. Makes sense. And this brings us to another crucial distinction. How do we separate friendship, rooted in philia, from romantic love, which often involves eros?
Yeah, that line can get a bit blurry sometimes.
For sure. So, where do philosophers usually draw the line?
The most obvious difference is usually the presence of sexual desire in romantic love, which isn't typically part of friendship.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward.
But even that distinction isn't always so clear-cut, at least according to some philosophers. Like Thomas, for example, questions whether that's the only defining characteristic.
Interesting. So, what else is there?
Well, Badwar, another philosopher, suggests that romantic love is about a yearning for physical union. Friendship, on the other hand, is more about a desire for psychological identification, like a deep knowing and being known by the other person.
So, it's more about connecting on a mental and emotional level?
Yeah, getting inside each other's heads, so to speak. But even this idea of psychological identification, the source points out, can be a little fuzzy. It's not always clear-cut.
It seems even philosophers struggle with defining those boundaries sometimes.
Absolutely. Love and friendship are complex things.
Totally agree. Now, let's shift gears a bit. The source goes into Aristotle's famous framework of three types of friendship: pleasure, utility, and virtue. You must be familiar with this.
Oh yeah, Aristotle's take on friendship is classic. It's a great way to break down the different motivations behind our connections with people.
So walk us through it. What are the driving forces behind each type?
Well, as you might guess, friendships of pleasure are all about the enjoyment we get from the other person. It could be their sense of humor, their shared hobbies, or just the fun we have together.
Makes sense. And utility.
Those friendships are more about the practical benefits we receive. Think networking, mutual aid, that sort of thing. It's more about what each person brings to the table in terms of usefulness.
Okay, so it's a bit more transactional.
Yeah, you could say that,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean there's no genuine affection. It's just that the initial motivation is different.
I got it. And finally, virtue friendships.
Now, those are the gold standard for Aristotle. They're based on a genuine admiration for the other person's character, their moral goodness.
So it's not about what they can do for you or how much fun they are. It's about who they are as a person.
Precisely. It's about appreciating their inherent goodness and striving for moral excellence together.
Okay, that's a beautiful idea. But I was reading and something struck me. It might sound a bit philosophical, but
Go on, I'm all ears.
well, how can we really say we care for a friend for their own sake in friendships of pleasure or utility? I mean, isn't the underlying motive kind of self-serving? You know, it's of our enjoyment or our benefit.
That is a sharp observation. And it gets to the core of a long-standing philosophical debate about friendship. If our concern for the other person is just a means to our own pleasure or gain, is it truly genuine? Does it really meet the ideal of true friendship, where the friend's well-being is valued for its own sake?
That's what I was thinking. It feels like there's a kind of tension there.
Absolutely. And this is why many philosophers today, as our source points out, see friendships of pleasure and utility as potentially deficient. Like they're not the full picture of what friendship can be. The focus now is on understanding those more robust, virtue-based connections.
Yeah, the ones that go beyond just shared fun or convenience.
Exactly. These are the ones that seem to stand the test of time.
Makes sense. Now let's dive into some of the key themes that emerge from different philosophical accounts of friendship. And I think mutual caring is a pretty central one, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a philosopher who doesn't see mutual caring or a form of love as essential to friendship.
And it's not just a fleeting feeling. What does it actually involve?
Well, it's a genuine concern for the other person's well-being and, crucially, a desire to promote their good for their sake. Not as a means to an end, but because you truly want them to flourish.
Okay, so it's about actively supporting their well-being. And that's where it gets tricky, right? Because then there's the question of how we value our friends. The source talks about appraising their value versus bestowing value upon them. As a philosopher who thinks about value all the time, could you explain the difference?
Sure. These two views represent different ways of understanding the basis of our care. The appraisal view says we care for our friends because we see and appreciate their good qualities, their virtues, their admirable traits. Our affection is a response to these existing values.
So it's like saying, I like you because you're funny, kind, and smart.
Basically, yes. Now, the bestowal view, particularly advocated by Friedman, suggests something different. He says that by deeply committing to someone as a friend, we kind of project or bestow a certain intrinsic value on them. Our commitment comes first, and then their qualities are valued because of that relationship, not as the sole reason for it.
So it's like saying, I value you because you're you, and that's enough.
Exactly. It's about valuing the person themselves, not just their attributes. And Friedman worries that if our care is based solely on appraisal, then our commitment is ultimately to those qualities, and the person becomes secondary.
But the source brings up a good counterpoint. Even if we initially like someone for their qualities, the relationship itself can lead us to change our own values. Like we grow together and start valuing things we wouldn't have before. It's like the relationship itself creates value.
That's a great point. And it emphasizes the dynamic, ever-evolving nature of friendship. We influence each other, shape each other's values, and grow together. It's a two-way street.
It is, and that leads us to another key theme, intimacy. What makes friendship so intimate, compared to other relationships?
Now, intimacy is a tricky concept to define, and philosophical accounts of it vary quite a bit. But it essentially boils down to the depth and closeness that sets friendship apart from those more casual connections.
Yeah, it's the feeling of really knowing someone and being known by them. But how do philosophers try to unpack that?
Well, Thomas, for example, puts a lot of emphasis on mutual self-disclosure, like sharing personal information, vulnerabilities, trusting the other person with sensitive details about yourself. He thinks this exchange is essential to building that bond of trust, that marks intimate friendships.
Okay, so it's about letting someone see the real you, flaws and all.
Exactly. But Kagi and Kennett, they offer a slightly different take. They argue that intimacy goes beyond just sharing private facts. It's more about sharing what you truly care about, your values, your passions, your deepest concerns, and then it's trusting your friend to be receptive and supportive, to not judge you or betray that trust.
So it's about a deeper level of trust, one that goes beyond just keeping secrets.
Absolutely. It's about trusting their judgment, their goodwill, and their ability to understand and support your core values. And this kind of trust can then lead to shared interests, enthusiasms, what Telfer calls a similar style of mind.
So you start to see the world in a similar way. You have that shared perspective.
Yeah. And White uses the term solidarity to describe this, like being on the same team when it comes to values and outlook.
I like that. And this brings up the whole idea of sharing values, because the source distinguishes between just happening to have similar values and a more active, influential process. Can you elaborate on that distinction?
Sure. A weaker form of shared values is simply a matter of coincidence. You and your friend just happen to hold similar beliefs or enjoy similar things independently. But a stronger form involves actively shaping and influencing each other's values. Like you introduce each other to new ideas, challenge each other's assumptions, and grow together.
It's like the relationship itself becomes a catalyst for personal growth.
Exactly. And this connects to the classic Aristotelian idea of friends as mirrors, reflecting back to each other aspects of your character and helping you see yourself more clearly, which, as a philosopher, you can appreciate the value of.
Oh, definitely. Self-knowledge is a huge theme in philosophy.
Right. And having a close friend who really knows you can be invaluable for gaining that self-knowledge. But the source also mentions some critiques of the mirror analogy. Some argue that it oversimplifies things by emphasizing passive reflection rather than the active role friends play in each other's lives.
So it's not just about seeing a reflection of yourself, it's about actively shaping and being shaped by the other person.
Exactly. Cocking and Caddett, they push back against this idea of friends as passive mirrors. They argue that friends direct and interpret each other, playing a much more active role in shaping our identities and how we understand ourselves.
So the self we see reflected in our friend is actually partly a product of the friendship itself. That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is. And it raises important questions about autonomy. Like, to what extent do we allow our closest relationships to influence who we become?
Yeah, where does healthy influence end and a loss of individuality begin? That's a tough one. Now, the source also mentions Friedman's view on intimacy, which is really interesting. He talks about it as a commitment to the friend as a unique individual, like their goals and values are inherently worthwhile just because they're theirs. How does that fit into the philosophical conversation about friendship?
Friedman's focus on bestowing value on the friend, seeing their aims as worthy simply because they are her aims, is a powerful idea. It goes beyond just objectively evaluating their worthiness. It suggests a deeper level of commitment, a kind of acceptance of the friend for who they are, regardless of external standards.
But as with any philosophical argument, there are counterpoints. The source mentions Whiting, who worries that this blurs the line between valuing something for the friend's sake and valuing it for your own sake. Like maybe you identify so strongly with the friend that their goals become your goals.
Exactly. And she proposes a different view, a more impersonal conception of friendship, based on a shared admiration of excellent character. Like, we become friends because we both value virtue, regardless of personal connection.
That sounds almost contradictory to our usual understanding of friendship as being deeply personal. And the source mentions Brink, who criticizes this view by emphasizing the importance of the historical relationship. He argues that the unique bond and shared history with a particular person are what justify our special concern for them. It's not just about admiring virtuous traits in anyone, it's about the specific connection with this person.
I think that resonates with most people's experience of friendship. And it brings us back to Cocking and Kennett's idea of friends actively shaping each other. They argue that this mutual influence isn't a bad thing, but actually contributes to our growth and self-understanding. They say that friends direct our interests and interpret our self-understanding, leading to a self that is partly co-created within the friendship.
So who we are is partly a result of our friendships. It's a fascinating and complex idea, and it again raises the question of why we should accept this influence. Like, what's the philosophical basis for allowing our friends to shape who we become?
A lot to unpack there, for sure. And the source then brings in Sherman's interpretation of Aristotle's idea of friends sharing a singleness of mind. This goes beyond just shared feelings like pride or shame. It's about a deeper level of shared values, a joint process of deliberation where friends arrive at conclusions together, even shaping their vision of a good life, or eudaimonia, together.
Wow, that's a powerful image, like two minds becoming one in a way. But doesn't that raise concerns about losing your individuality?
Absolutely. It's a strong conception of intimacy, and as such, it does raise those concerns about autonomy. If our identities become too intertwined, are we still individuals? The source mentions Friedman's federation model as a possible way to think about this. Like, individuals can maintain a degree of independence even within a close union.
So, like states in a federal system, they work together but retain their own sovereignty.
Exactly. It's about finding that delicate balance between connection and autonomy. And speaking of ending things, the source points out something I found really interesting.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Well, there's actually been very little philosophical exploration of the conditions under which it's appropriate to end a friendship.
You're kidding. That seems like a huge oversight. I mean, friendships ending can be just as impactful as romantic breakups.
Exactly. It raises all sorts of ethical questions like, what are our obligations to our friends? When is it okay to walk away? How do we do it in a way that minimizes harm?
So much food for thought there. But before we spiral down that rabbit hole, let's touch on the last common theme in philosophical accounts of friendship: shared activity. Because it's not enough to just care about someone from afar, right? Friendship involves actually doing things together.
You got it. It's not enough to just wish them well. You got to get out there and share experiences, pursue projects together. But the source makes an important point. This shared activity should be motivated, at least in part, by the friendship itself, not just by self-interest or external goals.
So, like going to a concert together because you both love the band and because you enjoy each other's company.
Exactly. The enjoyment of the activity is intertwined with the enjoyment of the friendship itself. It strengthens the bond. And the source notes that there's a link between a philosophical theory's understanding of intimacy and how it sees shared activity.
Oh, how so?
Well, Thomas, with his focus on self-disclosure, sees shared activity as less central than someone like Sherman, who emphasizes the idea of a shared life. And what's surprising is that the specific nature of shared activity is often under-theorized in philosophy.
Interesting. It's something we all intuitively understand, like hanging out or working on a project together, but maybe haven't really analyzed deeply from a philosophical standpoint.
Right, and Helm's plural agent view offers a unique perspective on this. He suggests that intimacy involves forming a kind of group mind with joint cares. Like you develop a shared evaluative perspective, expressed through interconnected emotions, desires, judgments, and actions.
So it's not just two individuals doing things together, it's like they become a single unit in a way.
Yeah, you could say that. And friendship arises, according to Helm, when this plural agent also cares about the relationship itself. It's like two people who enjoy playing tennis together, taking it a step further and valuing their identity as tennis partners.
That's a cool way to think about it. So we've explored all these different facets of friendship, but now let's get to the core of the philosophical inquiry: the value and justification of friendship. Why do we invest so much in these relationships? What makes them so worthwhile?
Big questions indeed, and ones that philosophers have wrestled with for ages.
From a personal perspective, it's easy to point to the more obvious benefits. Like Telfer talks about friendship as life-enhancing, making us feel more alive. Plus, there's the pleasure and practical usefulness of having good friends. And Annis adds the boost to self-esteem that comes from having people who care about us. But intuitively, it feels like there's got to be something more, something deeper that makes friendship so valuable.
Oh, absolutely. Those are great points, but they only scratch the surface. Cooper, in his interpretation of Aristotle, argues that friendship is actually essential for living a good life, achieving eudaimonia. He suggests that friends provide us with that crucial outside perspective needed for self-knowledge, that mirror we talked about earlier. And, he says, shared activities with friends help us stay engaged in virtuous activities. Things that contribute to our moral development.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about becoming a better person.
Exactly. And Biss, drawing on Kantian ethics, adds another layer. He sees friendship and trust as key to moral self-perfection. Like, we need those close relationships to challenge ourselves and strive for ethical growth.
It's all connected, isn't it? Friendship, self-improvement, morality.
It really is. And Shulman takes it even further. He suggests that friends form a unique community with its own inherent being and value. Though the source points out the exact nature of this value needs a bit more clarification.
Always room for more philosophical exploration, right? But now we get to the really tricky part: The philosophical problem of justification. Like, what justifies being friends with this specific person? Why them and not someone else?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And the source points out the problem of fungibility. Like, if our reasons for being friends with someone are based solely on general qualities that lots of other people could have, then it implies that friends are replaceable.
So, theoretically, we should always be looking to trade up for a friend with even better qualities. That feels wrong somehow.
Right. It doesn't sit well with our lived experience of friendship. So how do we overcome this problem of fungibility?
Well, the source discusses a few approaches. Some focus on the historical relationship, like the unique bond and shared history you have with a particular person are what make them irreplaceable. Sherman's Union view, for instance, argues that the shared past and interwoven identities make true substitution impossible.
But as we discussed earlier, that view raises concerns about autonomy. Like, if you become too intertwined, are you losing your individuality?
Right. And Whiting tries to address this by separating the reasons for starting a friendship from the reasons for maintaining it. He says initial reasons might be impersonal, like shared interests or values, which could be found in many people, but the reasons for continuing the friendship are grounded in that shared history, the specific experiences you've had together.
Makes sense. But the source rightly questions whether those historical factors alone are enough to fully justify the deep commitment and obligations we feel towards our friends.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, and maybe the real problem lies in our very conception of justification. Like, we're so used to looking for general, objective reasons for things. Maybe friendship just doesn't fit neatly into that framework.
That's a radical idea, but it might be onto something. Maybe we need to rethink our whole approach to justifying these deeply personal connections.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. What about the social value of friendship? How does it benefit society as a whole?
Well, Telfer argues that friendship cultivates a unique kind of consideration for others. Like, it teaches us to care for individuals for their own sake, not just as part of a collective. And Bloom builds on this, seeing friendship as a crucial source of moral development. It gives us opportunities to act for another's benefit, even if it goes against our self-interest.
So, good friends make us better citizens, in a way.
You could say that, but Cucking and Kennett offer a word of caution. They argue that friendly actions aren't inherently morally good, like a friend could encourage you to do something unethical.
Oh, that's true. Bad influence and all that?
Right. But the counter-argument is that true care for a friend should involve guiding them away from harmful or immoral actions. Koltansky even suggests that it's okay to defer to a friend's moral judgment, but only after ensuring they've thought it through carefully.
So it's about helping each other make good choices. And Friedman offers another interesting perspective on friendship's social value. He says that because friendship can support and validate unconventional values, it can actually drive moral progress within a society. Like, it challenges the status quo and pushes us to rethink our ethical norms.
That's a cool idea. Friendship as a force for positive change. But the source also points out the potential downsides, like in-group bias, the tendency to favor your friends over others, which can lead to social inequalities and limit our moral concern for those outside our circle.
It's a double-edged sword, like most things in life, but it's definitely a powerful force. And finally, the source gets into a really thorny area, the relationship between friendship and broader moral theory. It talks about the friendship critique that emerged in the 1970s, which challenged consequentialist and deontological frameworks. Can you explain what this critique is all about?
Sure. The core argument is that these traditional impartial moral theories just don't mesh well with the kind of reasons and motivations that are central to friendship. Friendship creates these special duties that we have towards our friends, duties that go beyond our general obligations to humanity. And that creates a conflict with the impartiality that so many ethical theories emphasize.
So it's like our personal obligations to our friends clash with the more universal moral principles that these theories promote.
Exactly. And Stalker, a philosopher, was particularly concerned about this. He called it moral schizophrenia. Like, you feel this disconnect because your personal motivations for being a good friend don't align with the impersonal demands of these theories.
That makes sense. And Stalker was particularly critical of consequentialism, which focuses on maximizing overall good. He argued that it misses the point of friendship, where actions are driven by concern for the specific individual, not just some abstract calculation of outcomes.
Yeah, it's not about achieving the greatest good for the greatest number. It's about caring for your friend for who they are. And Stalker argued that both act and rule consequentialism, as well as deontology, struggle to embody their reason in their motive when it comes to friendly actions. Their impersonal justifications just don't fit with the personal nature of friendship, leading to either a weakened friendship or that feeling of moral schizophrenia.
So it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The theories just don't seem to capture the essence of friendship.
Right. And Bloom and Friedman take it even further. They outright reject these impartial theories, saying they fail to recognize the moral value of partiality itself. Like, caring for someone as the specific individual they are is a good thing, even if it means treating them differently than others.
That's a pretty bold statement. But I guess that's what philosophy is all about, challenging assumptions and looking at things from different angles.
Exactly. And there are always counter-arguments, of course. Railton, another philosopher, tries to address this critique by drawing a distinction between subjective and objective consequentialism.
Well, that's interesting. What's the difference?
Well, subjective consequentialism is the kind that Stocker was mainly critiquing. It says that both our moral justifications and our motivations should come directly from consequentialist principles. But objective consequentialism allows for a separation. It says that while the ultimate justification for an action might be consequentialist, our personal motivations can be different. Like, we can genuinely care for our friends and act for their benefit, even if our ultimate aim is to contribute to the overall good.
So it's okay to have those personal motivations as long as the end result is still aligned with maximizing good consequences.
Yeah, that's the idea. But Badwar, she's not convinced. She argues that even this more nuanced form of consequentialism still requires valuing the friend instrumentally as a means to an end. And that just doesn't square with the idea of valuing them for their own sake, which seems essential to true friendship. So for her, that moral schizophrenia persists.
So no matter how you slice it, consequentialism just doesn't quite capture the essence of friendship.
That's her argument. And the debate then shifts to the nature of moral justification and motivation. Like, do our personal reasons for acting need to align with the impersonal reasons that justify the action from a moral standpoint? And Scanlon jumps into the fray too, offering a critique of teleological conceptions of value, which are often at the heart of consequentialist theories. He uses the example of loyalty and friendship, which seems to have value independent of any particular end or purpose.
So it's valuable in itself, not because it leads to some other good outcome.
Exactly. But Herke, another philosopher, counters that Scanlon's argument relies on a specific understanding of friendship's value. So the debate ultimately circles back to the fundamental question of what constitutes value itself.
So the conversation continues.
It always does. But what's clear is that the friendship critique has had a real impact on moral philosophy. It's forced philosophers to take personal relationships seriously and to refine their theories to better account for the complexities of friendship.
It seems like something we all take for granted actually has profound implications for our understanding of morality and the good life.
Absolutely. And this deep dive has only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from defining friendship to exploring its different types, its key themes, and its relationship with moral theory. It's been quite the journey.
It has. And it's clear that friendship, something that seems so simple and familiar, is actually a rich and multifaceted subject of philosophical inquiry.
And for you, our philosophically inclined listener, we'll leave you with one final thought-provoking question. Given the inherent partiality of friendship, the fact that we prioritize our friends over others, and the traditional emphasis on impartiality in many ethical theories, does a truly complete moral philosophy need to fundamentally rethink the role and value of personal relationships? It's a question worth pondering.
It definitely is. And it shows just how much depth and complexity there is to something we often take for granted. The simple yet profound act of being a friend,